Good evening and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of Tuesday, September 11th, 2018. Our agenda for this evening, excuse me, we'll have a financial update by Bonnie. Master Plan Implementation Committee Representative Michael Zeldin will present an article that's coming up for our next town meeting and give us a brief update on the Master Plan Implementation Committee's activities. We have special town meeting warrant review by Bonnie. The Highway Department has a reserve fund transfer request. The police chief, the police chief will be presenting his request for, at this point, next year's budget, but there was some discussion last night at the Selectmen's meeting whether we could do something this year for another SRO for the schools. And then there's member updates, public input, and minutes, which we have one set of minutes that we will hopefully get approved. And my favorite article of the evening is adjourned. So with no further ado, we'll start, and I'm going to take a couple of these out of order so we don't keep people up past their bedtime like the Selectmen did last night, and try to move this along. So we're going to start with Mike as representative of the Master Plan Implementation Committee.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for giving me the time to do this. And hopefully I can get it underway by finding the right slot here on this ancient machine.
Something's ancient there.
Scary.
Wonderful. Okay. I'm just going to go very quickly so we can sort of catch up where we left off. You may recall that the Master Plan Implementation Committee is formed to guide and support. Our role is not to make policy. Our role is basically to follow the master plan and those committees that are empowered with making policy and do whatever we can to make sure the appropriate committees and other organizations, including individual citizens, participate. So to get started, for a quick review, we had out of the 67 high priority items that the public chose during the course of, and at the conclusion of the master plan, 7 emerged as being more, shall we say, more important for the moment than others for a variety of strategic and practical reasons. And the list here, I think, is now familiar to you. I'm just going to simply go through the progress made on those. And most of these have very long timelines for completion. The criteria for success are, shall we say, often quite challenging because we, as you know, we are both resource limited, both with respect to the number of people and also money. So these things do not happen overnight. So quickly update status. As far as housing is concerned, as probably all of you know, the Planning Board has been working very hard and succeeded on drafting a number of regulations, changes in zoning bylaws, and the most important one is basically to provide suitable, diverse housing for the elderly in this community, whose numbers will be growing over the next several years before just demographically they begin declining again. Right now, the Planning Board, as I understand it, is making a great effort to provide boundaries to the pricing in order to meet the realistic needs of the financial needs of the seniors. And the bylaw text, by and large, has been, shall we say, prepared and written. However, the issue of providing boundaries is proving to be quite challenging as they take on the realities of the marketplace and the needs of the seniors, which are not often in concordance. But it's on its way. And how long it's going to take, I can't predict. Hopefully, it'll be by the beginning of next year. The historical survey, a very vital part of our, shall we say, heritage, that survey has been completed and will be incorporated as needed into other plans going forward. Including the town plan, the master plan, it belongs to the town, it doesn't belong to our particular committee. The project costs be incorporated into the yearly budgeting process, which obtained a high priority, is ongoing, thanks to Bonnie and her team and others. So it's no longer, shall we say, catch as catch can. I think it more than likely was introduced before this one was recognized as a top priority. I'm just reminding everyone here that it's happening. So it means that instead of having a process by which people jump in and out of line, in terms of, it's my turn to have a bicycle, it's my turn to have marbles, whatever it is, this attempts to bring some discipline in terms of what we have in resources and ask people to really make an effort to identify priorities.
Where will you put that line item, Bonnie?
It's in the capital plan.
Oh, in the capital plan. Okay.
Okay, the next one, which is just getting started because there were a couple of data points that had to be collected by the selectmen, and that is assessing the space needs at the town office building where we're sitting right now. A task force, one of the members is sitting in the audience, along with Chuck DeCosta of, I don't, he's here? Oh, okay. They're taking leadership role and having a task force take a very close look and make some practical recommendations about what the town could do, immediate, midterm, and long-term. And they've just taken, shall we say, the initial steps. This is perhaps one of the most challenging, both in terms of resources, as well as satisfying a whole set of often conflicting needs. So make no mistake, we should do everything we can to come in with feedback, with ideas, but most of all, support for that effort. Moving along, I'm going to start, shall we say, focusing more on the Littleton Common. Not that the other 5 or 6 other things aren't important. It's simply this one has to get, the start time and when it ever gets finished is measured in decades. So in order to keep those, shall we say, in view of our site, it's one of the reasons we put special urgency on it. The first item, and I'm just going to say there's 2 things going on in the common. Below ground, which is the sewer, and above ground, which is, just to be practical terms, zoning and people. Because that's where the visible action, that's where in the long run really matters. Because once infrastructure goes in underground, it's underground. So the sewer at this point has become now ready for a design study. This is not an insignificant step, both financially and also with respect to moving the project along. MPIC works very closely with and participates in many of the deliberations of the sewer task force that is basically headed by Glavy and Gerberg for the selectmen, and I can say that just from observation and interacting with property owners, many property owners in the common have expressed a strong enough interest in sufficient numbers to want to be hooked up to such a sewer system. The financing sources have been identified, although the financing is not yet complete for the whole project, but enough progress has been made on that financing so that they can move ahead and actually spend money on designing and expect to have an outcome from that. That's an important step. It's not as expensive nor as, shall we say, changing as actually putting a shovel in the ground and putting in all the necessary equipment. But without the design, you can't move ahead and build anything intelligently, nor make best use of the resources that could be necessary. So the idea is to mitigate unknowns and to identify what can be done on what schedule. And this is where the design study is more than a study, it's a roadmap to the future. Above ground. In brief, MPIC has taken, with the participation of the planning board and other boards, sort of a leadership. Basically, we try to get out front with this because we feel this has to be coordinated with so many different other parts of the town. Not everybody has the time to put all this together at one time. And between myself and the other members, most notably Anna Houston, Mike Fontanella, Jonathan Leibowitz, more recently Megan Ford and Lyle Webster, we've now reached the point where we're about ready to begin the process of doing zoning in response to what the town so far, and I have to say we have one more step to do, residents of the town have informed us. So at the moment, we're starting to, I also like to stop here and remind everyone here, just so you get put it in context, because some of you, I'm sure, know this historically. I was reminded of it again. I need constant reminders about this because I get heavily into where we're going in the future. But not too many years ago, this town did change the zoning for the common. It is already zoned for multi-use and for mixed use. So we're not doing anything new here. What we're adding is infrastructure to make it happen, because right now, without certain infrastructure, those zoning changes are not necessarily meaningless, you just can't execute them, and because the health department would stop you cold, okay? The septic is the septic is the septic. There are limitations on land use and what you can do, how many people, et cetera. I'm sure all of you understand that. But it really comes home when you start looking at what you can do in the common. Okay, so at the moment, we're beginning the process, our consultants, Fort Point, is beginning the process of putting out preparing the rough drafts that will have to go through the usual process of being examined and vetted by the planning board, and then eventually through council, and eventually to the town. So we're still steps away. And most of all, public feedback. Next, all right. On July 17, we had a Littleton Common workshop, and in brief, what we did is we presented the town with a number of types of scenarios. That is, this is what we have now, here's a step up in terms of type of density. By density, I mean how much housing you would have, where things would go roughly. Frankly, any change what we have now is going to look significant, simply because of where we are at the moment. So so here's a picture of what we have right now. And by the way, in order to make this cost-effective, the consultants on our committee decided to focus for demonstration and understanding purposes on a particular part of the common. And this particular part of the common, in the lower right-hand side, that's the Northern Trust building, in case you want to know what that is, which, by the way, I can tell you more than likely is going to be removed by them because they've bought everything on that side of the road, pretty much. And what they plan to do with it, what they have in mind, we've met with them once, and their designers and all the rest. We're still in the talking phase. I don't think they've come before the planning board. Nothing's happening, but they're aware that there's change afoot, not just the sewer, but also talking about what the common would look like. So now you have an idea geographically of where we focused our attention on, because it turns out that this is the place where, the location where if there's going to be change over the short term, and I mean over the next 5 to 8 years, maybe more, this is more than likely where it could start. Mainly because of Northern banks and other folks, including, by the way, Bank of America is no longer going to have a center where they are at the moment. They're doing something. I made contact with them. However, their bureaucracy is heavily, no one makes a decision without, I guess, several layers chiming in. So we're waiting for all the layers to come together. Okay, so moving on. This is the scenario, roughly speaking, that the type of arrangement that the majority, in fact, 2/3 of the folks who attended the session endorsed. And they got very interested in it, and as you may or may not suspect, you probably know that the number of zoning changes that would have to be made in order to accommodate this are frankly very few. The amount of parking reduction is remarkably low, okay? The amount of space that gets used is not insignificant. It represents a slight increase, an increase from where we are now. But more importantly, the participants made it very clear on their own to the consultants and to us that they wanted to have what I'm just going to call, they wanted a common that worked, that was livable. This was more important to them than how economically significant it was or whether or not it would look slick. It had to do with how does it look and feel. Do I want to go there? Are there amenities like bakeries, small shops? We already have the point, which is by comparison, an economic and commercial engine. Just leave it at that, compared to what people have for the common. So let's be clear, this is not, I hate to use negatives, but this is not a point redone. But also a very strong interest in having mixed, diverse types of housing in town. This is what the residents are really interested in, having housing in the common, smaller living units combined with retail mixed in. Okay, so this is sort of a summary of what that workshop turned out to be. The owners of property, commercial owners, many of whom are not Littleton residents, also attended. And they chimed in and not only expressed their strong support for it, but an interest in where do we go next? What can they do with their property? Some are more excited than others. Some have the resources to do it, others do not. It's entrepreneurship and capitalism at its best. We simply do not know what they're going to do. It wouldn't surprise me if some of them sell. It wouldn't surprise me if some of them turn things around. No idea. However, with the infrastructure coming in, all you need is one or two to trigger a response. And that's why certain folks who are new to the common, or newly eyeing the common, like Northern Trust, they represent a non-insignificant influence, possibly on what goes forward. But most of it is up to us, the town. Okay. So, as you can guess, the preference for look and feel includes a welcome place to go, emphasis by walking, biking, as residential housing of various types, a common meant for locals. That doesn't mean they're going to exclude folks. It's meant to belong to and reflect Littleton. Okay, now, more key results. Now, we're still working on little aspects of the economic impact. Very important point. If we're going to put this kind of effort in, what does the town get in return economically for this? I have to report, as most of you probably suspected or knew instinctively, that the economic impact and benefit to the town in terms of tax revenue is going to be moderate. It may double. But if you're starting out with a low number, if you're starting out, let's say it's somewhere between $300,000 to $500,000 net, I'm leaving out the folks who own the land on which IBM exists, because that distorts the picture quite a bit. It will probably, under the type of scenario we talked about here, the best projection is it'll perhaps double. That is the benefit, tax revenue benefit flowing into the town. Now, that's not basically small change, but it will not relieve the town of its resource requirements. It's not a panacea. It's a common.
I have a question on that. Do
Sure.
you have the breakdown between residential and commercial, meaning it's going to double? Are you talking about commercial growth is going to double? Or are you talking about a blend, or are you talking about?
Blend, because the calculation or the estimates are based on, rather than transactions, because that would be the common thing that assessing does. They basically wait for a transaction which informs which is informed by the marketplace. That's like, in this time, that's not probably prudent to do. That means overpromising. I have no idea what the market's going to be like a year or 2 years from now. So what we've done instead is used for that strip and try to extrapolate the assessed value based on, shall we say, actual income and sales reported by the enterprises and the rentals and the residences that are there now. So this is not transactional. It's what's the bare bones report. So keep in mind, for example, IBM has a certain value. That value is not based on, quote, sales. That's not based on its.
No, but IBM doesn't add kids into the schools either.
Okay.
Whereas you start putting housing in, that's a whole different discussion.
As reported earlier by the school committee chairman, Mike Fontanella, we have double and triple checked. No longer I'll just simply say the data are very, very clear. There's been a decoupling because of changes in demographics. Not only is our town aging faster than the rest of the state is aging. So there's a decoupling, a strong decoupling between, that's aging one thing, a decoupling between people, the number of people, and the number of people who have kids who go to our school system. In other words, we've seen a significant increase in the number of houses in the town, but not a comparable increase in the number of kids attending school. Now, if the trend is following the graph pretty well, now, not everyone have heard this, and maybe those who've heard it still, maybe you're one of them, simply don't believe that's the case.
Let me
Sure.
interject something.
Sure, please.
I attended an MSBA seminar about two years ago.
Yeah.
And their projection was exactly what you're talking about, a decrease.
Yeah. But I want to be very careful
Statewide.
here, that the type of housing, and I'm now getting into the weeds a little bit, the type of housing here are 1 and 2 bedrooms. We're not talking about 4-bedroom houses here. This is 1 or 2 bedrooms, maybe 1,200 square feet, average rent about $1,000. I mean, this is the kind of conservative model we wanted to use.
Well,
We can debate that
I
all
don't know
night.
where you got the $1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I'm reflecting here, there is all I can tell you is that, not only that, but we've identified what we'll call the gaps that exist in the common with respect to retail. And the two big gaps, as you probably already know, is basically food, restaurants, and also certain types of amenities. That would include shops that, believe it or not, luggage, jewelry, bakeries, that's basically food. We have about 4 or 5 categories where we just don't have a critical mass at all in the common. I mean, that's no surprise to you, but these are the areas of opportunity. And since we're using the very same databases that, shall we say, people who are interested in making investments and bringing amenities, would be interested in bringing amenities to the common, they're going to look at the same data produced by ESRI, which is basically a mapping, a geographic mapping and data corporation that serves many governments, companies, and others. And what they do is they map, quite literally, what do you got and what's missing. To give you an idea of what's missing, ESRI also reported, and it's been verified by other organizations which do similar work, that at least $10 million a year is spent by Littleton residents outside of Littleton. Now, not all of that, it's probably an underestimate, but let's assume not all of it is recoverable by any way imagining for bringing it back into
Your fault, come
Littleton.
back some UPS trucks.
Sorry,
Amazon.
Okay?
I'm Amazon.
All I can tell you is that even if we captured, 1/10 of that, for basically economic activity in the common, anywhere in Littleton, that's not an insignificant boost for us. So there's, shall we say, potential that is measurable for revitalizing the common. It just won't reflect itself immediately, and maybe not enough in the long term to benefit the tax revenue, but it could definitely make the common and the town a more interesting, vibrant place in which to live.
So Mike,
This is what what's
sorry,
approach one.
can
I'm
you,
sorry.
can you talk for me, because the zoning talks to things like parking and that kind of stuff, but in terms of walkability, and does it look nice, and is it welcoming? I mean, how do you make sure that happens?
Thank you.
Next-
Did I
next
send you a
slide.
preview? Or you want me to just move along? You want me to move along? I'm sorry, okay.
Whichever.
I'll move along, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Really, because I'm, okay. All right, I want to skip how we're spending the money and go right to the toolbox where we are. Right now, the town is using a particular kind of zoning. It's called Euclidean. And it simply means it sorts out and defines based on use. It says, you can't have a garage here, but you can put it over there. And it also says you can go this far up to your boundary, but no further. Other than that, it's dead silent. There's another kind of coding regulation tool that's out there. It's been out there in one form or another for 40 years. It's just coming into use in Massachusetts more prevalent. For example, AIR is now using it on 2 sites. They even have professionals inside their planning operation who have training in this particular area, in addition to the standard Euclidean. So it's already something that's being used. And what does it do? It matters what it does. How it does it, I'll quickly say. But the main thing it does in action, it provides community control of what the community prefers to experience and how the common would look and works. And it does it by basically literally designing with input from the community what the building should look like, even as far as the materials, the frontage, the sides, where the parking goes, where the parking should go. So in other words, it's quite literally as if you're taking a site and deciding this is how we want it to look.
This is what Lowell's doing now, right now,
Yes,
right?
that's the city. And the motive for using this ranges from, we don't want urban sprawl. We don't have urban, we may have sprawl. And we definitely don't want, what we do want is something that's welcoming and not just another strip. Okay. This picture to me is worth 1,000 words, and I'll just say, on the left is another town in Virginia, which I hope survives. Okay. On the left is an approximate, this is what they are at the moment, before they use form-based. And on the right is what happened to them after they used form-based regulation. So in this particular case, if you notice, the setbacks from the curb have been set in a certain way. The road has been defined in a certain way. All of that comes from literally high-quality architectural renderings that depict it and tell people who are building, who are developing, this is the way you want to do it. That's the long and the short of it.
So Mike, was this based totally on zoning, or were there other infrastructure elements involved in that?
I only looked, frankly, I only queried towns that basically had used form-based. I did not ask
Okay.
if they had a sewer. From looking at and knowing this town and where this town is, the answer is they have a sewer. I mean, if I started saying I only want to look at towns that didn't have a sewer, I think I saw
I
two.
was just curious.
Sure,
You know.
I saw two, and they only looked to use it, they didn't actually follow through because of money. Not because of form-based, they just didn't have the money. Okay, so, what's happened is that, let me just go back so that that I have some idea of where we are. We had a total between what the town provided and what the Commonwealth EA grant provided us. We had $140,000 that we let on a contract to Fort Point. It has brought us, quote, up to this point. We estimate by that, and Body probably knows the real number, but I suspect that we have about, before the next bill comes in, about $93,000, but of that, I think $60,000 is going to walk out because we've had this a lot of intense activity since that last report. The invoices come in, I'm not going to give you cash flow, but my best estimate is we have somewhere between $33,000 and maybe $15,000 left in our budget appropriately to do the necessary draft zoning we thought we were going to do. Until the town responded the way it has so far and asking for this look and feel requirement, until we had the economic impact statement and made it clear, we're not trying to create an economic engine here. We're trying to do housing and amenities in a walkable common that people want to enjoy. So my request here is, having gotten an estimate from Fort Point, they have the expertise on board to do. They have experience in this. They're familiar with the town, so it's not like starting from scratch with from zero. The estimate here is that they provided us is, and I'll give you some backup numbers for this, is about $42,000. I say about only because their actual number is $41,170. I compared this to the amount of money being spent by AIR doing two sites with in-house professionals. They've also have grants, as it were, in hand already, and they're spending about $70,000 for their two sites, and they have professionals. So that gives you an idea, and their sites aren't that much larger than ours. They're not the same type of sites. So I think what we got here is a reasonable range, a reasonable frame for the estimate. My concern as chairman and someone who's trying to do something that the town really can get into is to make sure we have enough public workshops, enough meeting with appropriate departments in the town, planning, board of selectmen, your board, every board, health, everyone, to make sure that we mind our P's and Q's in doing the design here. I can tell you that Fort Point does have the talent, proven talent, of taking what people say and get excited about and turning it into real graphic depictions.
Okay, so
It's an art
you're,
form.
so Mike, you're looking for 42,000,
That is
which is
correct.
up from 30, went from 30 to 35, and now it's 42. And, I mean, sounds like the death of 1,000 cuts.
No,
I mean, is it, what's,
42 is,
how
the
should we
reason,
believe the 42?
I will take complete responsibility for its escalation because I felt, and I believe I think other people in town would feel, I wanted to make sure that we had enough public engagement in this. Public engagement is not inexpensive. And if you look at the budget, a lot of this budget is for drawing and for public engagement. That's what this is about. And the reason I said, no, I want more talent here, I want more talent there. If I could spend less money and get it, I would.
Okay, so assuming town meeting supports the 42,000, the town's into this process at this point for 182,000.
That's correct.
And what's the next step?
After the
What are-
zoning is
What are you
done,
coming back for in May for the next May, the next round? Is it another 100,000? Is it another
I would,
200,000?
I do not anticipate, I can't tell the future, but once we have the zoning in place, that is the directive, that's the foundation for revitalizing the common. Now, it's possible, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that, that's it, we're all done. It is possible, for example, that everything from landscaping to putting in more lighting, to putting in, shall we say, traffic assist items that are not necessarily on the road, someone might come forward, not necessarily from my committee, not necessarily for zoning, and say this ought to be done. That's a different issue. Someone might walk in and say, oh, I really like that, what you've done. I like these sketches that you've put out here for, and the drawings that you have here for King Street and for Great Road. By the way, we're doing a development back here where these streets are not on the main line of either King or Great Road. We would like to use it. I have no idea if that will or will not happen.
Okay, so.
So do you have any mechanism to control scope creep?
Yeah, sure, because
Well,
zoning is zoning.
I mean, public input only increases scope.
Right.
So do you have a mechanism to, and I'm sure that it's a very difficult question, but to control scope creep, because, I mean, I'm in the business, I know Fort Point very well.
Oh, good.
They're a very good organization. But all they do is implement what you tell them to do.
Right.
And how do you limit that?
Okay. First of all, the limitation is going to come from very frankly, the public, in a certain sense, provides the first barrier. Okay? In other words,
Well, they're not a barrier.
no,
They're a
in
tidal
the
wave.
sense, in the following way. It's what they want is, quite frankly, fairly, I'll just rate it as being moderate. They're not looking to pack in 300 or 400 units into this area. So already the design is scaled to what it's scaled to. Okay, number one.
Currently.
No, yeah, currently. Number two, the other thing that limits it is, very frankly, zoning is meant to define what you can do. If someone comes in and wants to exceed the zoning limits, because that would be it, then someone like the ZBA, the planning board, has to say, oh, it's okay. So-
But aren't you proposing some different type of zoning where it's non-Euclidean? I can't remember what.
No, yeah,
the term is.
yes, it's non-Euclidean in the sense that it specifies. Picture this, that instead of having a text in front of you that says you may build up to this point, you could only do 3 floors high. It takes the next, and this may be more radical. Your facade can go up right to the limits, number one, that would be Euclidean. However, you can use an awning of the following colors. I'm being very detailed here. And this is what the awning can look like. Okay? You don't do that in Euclidean. Okay? You have to show it in a drawing, this is what it has to look like. Posts, for example, clapperty, any of the roofing, where and how, if you put any equipment on the roof, how does it show? Where's the piping for it? The kind of detail we're interested here is for housing and for some retail. And that's pretty simple stuff. And the scale that they have here is what basically we asked them to provide. So the limit here is, I know this sounds like it's almost circular, it's $42,000.
I think he's going down Mike, I think you're going down the right road with getting more public input. What scares me is your initial meeting, you had, 65 to 70 people show up for that, which is about 2/3% of the town's population. I'd like to see more input, and in particularly, I'd like to see more input from the neighbors in the area. I don't know if they were there.
They were
But the
there.
people that live on Adams Street, the people that live on Robinson Road, they're gonna be living with that right next door to them. So it'd be good to see what they think of it.
The other thing we did is we also carried out an online survey, which has its problems because a lot of people aren't used to it. And we got a lot of responses from that, and after they were analyzed, it fell in line with, and there were different people, apparently, than who attended the meeting. That still doesn't come up to the numbers you're after. We are planning our next public, there are two events coming up pretty fast. One of them is we're going before the planning board with this concept where the folks who are going to be actually doing the kind of regulation we're talking about here, modifications and regulations, are going to make a presentation. So that's one place that the town can learn. But more significantly, I believe it's on the 11th or 10th of October, we're going to be having another public forum where we're going to recheck. And we're trying to select our venue, what style of reach out we're going to use. During the master plan, we experienced all kinds of fluctuations in how many people attended based on the topic and based on the time of day. And believe it or not, if we made it come in anytime you want to express your opinion, that was not the greatest. The greatest one was when we served spaghetti. That's when we had the most people show up. So what we got were the spaghetti eaters.
I think Greg's question is more of a selecting question than it is a finance question. We kind of went off.
Yeah, no, we've,
Well, I'm wearing it all the time.
So
okay, so
we're-
the bottom line for us is we have a $42,000 request on the table.
Right.
The selectmen did not vote on this, right, last night?
They did,
They did. They voted to support?
yes.
Unanimous?
Yes.
And
They voted to insert them.
Insert, but not support.
Right. Chuck
So
in,
that won't come until when, the 24th?
That's when they'll, I think, believe, start making recommendations on these.
Okay.
can I just ask one more question? The deliverable for this is what, exactly?
Zoning regulations.
It is a zoning reg, that's what I was gonna
Absolutely.
ask. Was it just pictures, or is it actually zoning regulations, so?
It's zoning regulations in the form of both pictures and any necessary accompanying text. Turn page 5, look at this
Okay,
diagram.
that's all that was,
Okay.
I just wanna make sure.
One other question. If the sewer project is not viable, if it doesn't work, this won't work.
I still would recommend that we do it.
I mean, that's not a statement, that's a question.
It's not that it wouldn't work, it would be very difficult to implement the way it's, the way
The
it's.
residential portion of it would be
You could
impossible.
possibly, I don't see how unless somebody invents a magic technology, okay?
well, that's-
But I want to say this,
That's the big point. That's
wait.
the bucks.
okay? However, spending $42,000 on zoning is no different, for doing this, is no different what the town did when it changed the zoning for the common the first time, to make it mixed use. We never, the town didn't take it to the next step and specify what they wanted to look like. So without this zoning in place, whether or not the sewer goes through, that, to me, they're two separate things. This is a way of capturing and preserving and assuring, even if it gets changed later, sooner or later, whether the town wants to do it or we're put in a position where we have, I hate to say it, no choice, hopefully not in my lifetime, okay, that this will be in place. So just like the current zoning is in place. So it's $42,000, it's not $1 million, it's not even $500,000. Okay? So it's basically an investment that reflects, I want to put it worst case, it's a well-felt, very practical aspiration.
Okay, great. Thank you for coming in. Normally, what we do on this kind of an article is we wait for the selectmen, because it's they're sort of overseeing your organization. And assuming they approve it, we'll be voting on the articles on the 2nd of October. So that's when we would actually vote to support or not. I personally don't see any reason not to, but see what the selectmen come up with, and then we'd, vote on the 2nd. Okay?
Okay?
Great.
Get out of
Thank
your
you.
way. Thank you very much for your,
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks, Mike. Yep.
Nice job, Mike.
oh,
Is this like a full-time job for you now, Mike?
what?
Is this like a full-time job for you now?
No, I'll tell you what's really interesting, okay,
You want to be a consultant?
what? No, I already did that. I've already done that, and
why you
this
can
is not
afford
my, yeah, let me get out of your way, because you have folks
The
waiting.
chief has got a gun, so you probably want to move it along.
He only uses it under duress.
He's under duress.
Oh, he's wearing a tie.
Still 10 minutes, you Mike, I don't know. We're going to shuffle down to adjourn now.
Yeah.
That'll be under duress.
Are you gonna use this computer? No. Okay.
Okay. Chief, if you want, we'll go through the SRO, and then we'll go to capital. Thank you, Maren.
Careful.
Oh, Jesus. A pad. Appreciate that. Wow, what a real.
How are you?
Great. Everybody knows our new chief, I assume? Yeah.
Thanks for having me tonight.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure if many watched the selectmen's meeting last night, but I'm pretty passionate about hiring a second school resource officer for our school district and/or kids that are placed out of our district also. In 2004, Littleton went after a school grant from the DOJ. The school grant was a 5-year grant, where it started off at 100%, and the next year went down to 75, 50, 25, and then the town had to pick up the portion for at least 1 year. So the police department put it into their budget by that 5th year, and we consumed that position. In 2004, our population was around 8,400, 8,500 in that area. Fast forward now, we're over 10,000. We still only have one school resource officer that's been funded by the police station, or the police department budget. So I was approached by a parent group almost like before I was even sworn in about a second SRO. And I guess they had been in talks for the last year with Chief King at that time about implementing a second SRO. I had been in talks with Chief King prior to that, saying, hey, let's try to push this forward, the need is there. And the reason the need is there, in my eyes, and in several members of our department, is we're lacking getting involved in the youth at a younger age. We have one school resource officer that's stationed at the high school, and he goes to the middle school when there's an issue, or he'll go to the elementary school when there's an issue, or he'll show up at the Shaker Lane School when there's an issue. But 90% of his time is at the high school, because that's where most SROs are stationed out of. This day and age, we want to get to the younger kids at a very, very young age, so they can actually see that the school resource officer is a human. not a uniform, not a police officer. They want to see that they can actually have that interaction. They want to be able to bridge that gap between the youth, the parents, the teachers, and themselves, so they can humanize it. So when they go forward all the way up through 12th grade, they know, hey, that's Officer John, or hey, that's Officer Matt. I think everybody knows I'm pretty passionate about this position because I did it for 10 years. Matter of fact, my biggest highlight in my career, besides making chief, was when I was asked my last year as SRO to give the graduation speech on the alumni field. So I felt I truly made a connection with those kids at that point in time. But I think we're failing some progression going forward. Now, I had a conversation with Fred, and Fred's like, put this plan into place if that's how you feel about it, and that's what I've done. This is my first step Monday night, was to put it in place for 2020. Do I think the program would start tomorrow, or would I start it tomorrow if we had the funding? Absolutely, 100%. I'd be behind this, and I would make it work if we could. But it comes down to dollars and cents. So Cindy Napoli asked last night, is there a way that we could actually implement this now? And, you know, how would we implement it if I did? So the implementation point would be that I would leave that officer in the high school, and he would be there. He would be a liaison for the high school and also for the Shaker Lane School. I would put the second officer into the middle school, and that second officer would take care of that whole campus down there, which means the middle school, the elementary school, Tiger's Den, and then the aftercare programs that happen within the middle school itself. And that new officer in the middle school would be teaching a new program called Project Alert. If you look at Project Alert, it's similar to what we used to teach as DARE, except Alert is more bonding with the kids and getting them to see what the choices are in regard, you know, getting them to see the healthy choices for their adolescent behavior, and hopefully curbing them and mentoring them so they can actually see what an SRO does. And having that SRO within that school, they can have, you know, 3 hats all in one. They not only have a police officer, they have a mentor, they have a liaison for outside agencies, DCF, DYF, and they also have a confidant, which sounds kind of goofy or silly in some people's eyes because everybody thinks they have a great relationship with their son or daughter, just like I do. I have the best relationship in the world. But my son talks to my brother more than he talks to me about personal issues, just because he feels comfortable with them and they're working together and whatnot. They have that confidence. It's that third neutral party. And I think it's great. And the other portion of this whole entire implementation is I'm kind of selfish that I want another officer on the road. And if that officer is there in the schools and a major incident happens in town, that's a second body that can come to that major incident. And it's not when is this going to happen or if this is going to happen. It is going to happen eventually someday. We need to be prepared for it.
So Chief, is there any, excuse me for being ignorant on the whole thing, but is there any kind of training or any, I mean, obviously it takes some kind of special person to be an SRO. Is there any kind of training that goes along with that?
Steve, that's a great question. First of all, before they go into the schools, they go into an 80-hour course. 40 hours is just for talking to kids and how you get along and how you go about your day with the schools. The other 40 is all in juvenile law. And, you know, when can you talk to a kid? When can you counsel a kid? When is it a behavioral issue or a disciplinary issue? And when is it an issue where the officer needs to get involved as to criminal act at that point in time? I wouldn't just hire an officer off the street and throw him in the schools. Absolutely not. How I would do it is we put the seasoned officer that we already have on the department that knows juvenile law, that has probably been working in the schools a little bit here and there, get them the 40-hour training, and then put them in the school, and then we backfill that position from there on with a newer officer to work the streets.
Thanks.
Are there any additional liability concerns?
There's absolutely no liability concerns in my eyes. Our officers are in and out of the schools all day on patrol as it is, It's the same as if, you know, I was going to school with my gun on.
And do you have a plan for when school's out with the additional resource
Yeah.
officers?
Traffic-wise in this town, I would, typically what's happened in the past is the SRO was put into the specialty division, like the detective unit, and they would pick up cases during school break, or they pick up cases during summer break and work those. Traffic has picked up tenfold in this town. I mean, our accidents are almost doubled since 2 years ago. Speeding is almost doubled since 2 years ago. It's only a matter of time because of the point, and more traffic, more volume. So during the school vacations and during the summer, I'd implement a whole traffic program where that officer would be involved in traffic for the town, where they're not in the schools, they're not responsible to go to the schools, but yet we can definitely use them for different traffic venues, targeted areas, neighborhoods, crosswalks, the point, bike patrol. Keep going.
Park them at the end of Wilson Road.
I didn't say that. Sorry, Gary.
You meant,
I have
No, go ahead, finish.
one other question. With regards to the position, what are other towns doing that are like size? Do they have 2 SROs or,
Groton has 2.5 right
okay,
now, and I compare us to Groton. But they have 2, they have a sergeant that's in the high school, and they have an officer that's in the middle school. And they actually share roles throughout the whole town. You know, I said we have 4 campuses. The National School Resource Officer, they say 1 to 1,000 is the ratio. Well, that's 1 to 1,000 population in one campus. Unfortunately, we don't have our schools all on one campus. We have ours spread out throughout the town. So it you know, and if you look at the population of the schools, you know, we have close to 1,700 students, and then we have close to 400 employees. And that's not including what we have at the Oak Meadow Montessori School, because we do have to service them because they're in our town. We have to provide some kind of services to them also, even though they are private. The Shelby Valley Technical High School, we do have several kids that go there. Westford has a separate SRO over there, but if we had a second SRO, we could have a liaison to that school also, so they can go there and get feedback to our kids, about our kids.
That's what I was gonna ask you. You'd mentioned earlier about also providing services or whatever to the out-of-district, and I didn't know, how does that work? What does that mean?
We actually have a mutual aid policy with the other towns, so we can go in and out as long as the MOU is signed. And we just recently renewed our MOU with the district attorney's office, the school district here. The MOU would cover us for the Parker School, if we have students going there, or any private venue that a student would be going to. Gives us the option to be able to talk to the administrators to find out what's going on with our residents that are students in their school.
Now, when we talked the other day, you were thinking that this officer would be sort of a $50,000 to $60,000 graded officer, or in that range. I don't know what you finally ended up with, but
I did, so I actually talked to Bonnie today. Is it okay if I talk about this?
Yes,
Going
go
forward.
ahead.
So the 55 to 60 is to replace the officer. And in finding out, I had calculated about 30% for benefits for
Right.
the newer officer. We're group 4, so it's actually probably like 40%. So it puts it right around the $80,000 mark. If we implemented it now, by the time I hire somebody and get them in the schools, it'd probably be like January 1. So I wouldn't need the 80,000 if we did it now. If we went forward and did it for 2020, yes, I would need it at that point in time, but, you know, we'd cut that in half and start January 1,
okay.
which,
So the budget impact annualized would be between 90 and 100,000 because of, if it's, we bring in a new hire, we pay the OPEB on top. So just, you know, think in terms of a $90,000 to $100,000 adder to the police spending for this program. And I know Cindy, you spoke up last night about maybe requesting if there was some way we could do something before, even in FY19.
Right.
You personally would like to see it, and then I kind of zoned out after that, to be perfectly honest with you. So I'm not really sure where you guys ended up on that discussion, so
Right.
could you update us maybe?
We left it with, we wanted Bonnie to just find out more about the funding piece of it, if we did implement it now,
Right?
as opposed to waiting a full year, because unfortunately with a school year, as you know, it's not like we could implement this in May, we'd have to wait a full calendar year, and I just, personally, I think it's important that we implement this at this phase if we can afford to do so, as opposed to waiting a year, just with, we have Project Alert coming online. Kelly Clenchy and other members of the school are very, very excited about that. And you know I'm involved with the Littleton Coalition Against Addiction. I think having a second school resource officer is really important at this phase in our times. I mean, these kids are facing a lot of things, and it's not only drug prevention through education, but it's things that might be going on at home. So there's so many benefits to having the second SRO aside from school
Is the
safety.
present SRO working with your interdiction group,
So-
or?
An SRO, no.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, go ahead.
So, Project Alert that Cindy was talking about is a new program that's gonna start this year. We have a civilian that's running the LCAA that's gonna help teach that. But one of our officers, Megan Wazinski, actually went and got certified 2 weeks ago to teach Project Alert and be a co-teacher with that whole project that's going forward. So I'm supporting it 100%. I'll take it out of my overtime budget if I have to at this point in time to have her go in the schools and teach this.
So does Megan, as a Project Alert trained individual, interact directly with the kids like an SRO would, or how is that working?
So right now, it's gonna be on a per diem basis. She works patrol shift during the day. We're gonna backfill her slot on days that they teach. I believe it's it's a 7-week cycle that they're gonna be teaching. And during that time, I'm gonna have to backfill her slot with overtime to make sure that we go through the program. But I'm fully committed to go through with the program, and we're gonna make it happen one way or the other.
So Cindy, when you say implement it now, does that mean January? I mean, what is now?
For the second SRO?
Yeah.
As soon as possible.
As soon as possible, I mean, not necessarily
Okay, well, I
January,
wasn't-
but.
Are you waiting for town meeting, though, for money, or you want to do it sooner than that?
That's what we're trying to find, the
That's what we're
mechanism.
trying, that's where Bonnie comes in, we were
Yeah,
trying to
you-
figure out
You'd
what
have
to
to
do.
wait for town meeting
Okay,
for funding,
that's what I
because
wanted to be
it
clear.
would need to be appropriated wages into the police department budget. The only time that we've worked out, a schedule that's kind of odd in the past is, I want to say, 10 years ago, maybe. There was an agreement in the first year or two of implementation, the school picked up half of the cost of an SRO, and the town picked up the rest, and then the town put it into their operating budget, a year or two later. So, I mean, if we could do that, if there were some appetite on the school department, I was like throwing some numbers together today, it was, if we did this for January 1st, I'd need 42,000. If we split it in half, and the town bore, 21,000, and the school bore 21,000, then we could get it done in the fall town meeting. Finding $42,000 it sounds like it's not a lot of money, it's a lot of money in the operating
Right.
budget when you're
Right.
looking at, where can I pull it from? So, if that were something that the boards would be.
So we are following up with the schools to see if there is an appetite for
There's
that?
the joint meeting scheduled for the 24th, so that will be, that's one of the
That was
recommendations
right.
that
We
I'm
tabled
putting
it forward
forward.
to
I'm
talk
looking to
about
see
it.
if there are other options, but that's definitely one that I will put forward as.
But wouldn't it make sense to try to get together, maybe you and Cindy, I mean, obviously you're passionate about it, sit down with Kelly and Mike and see if, there's any interest at all on that side. So if we come together on the 24th,
Right.
we could not send people away to have another discussion, but we could
That makes
actually
sense.
maybe have a decision. And if it just can't happen, then
We
we'll
go forward with
consider it
2020.
for the 2020 budget.
You're still talking about you're still talking about getting information together for fall town meeting, though, not doing something before
Right.
that?
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
yeah.
Yes.
So Bonnie, the $42,000 would cover what period?
from January to June.
Oh, okay,
That's what
okay. So half the fiscal
Half the
year.
calendar.
Yeah.
Which again, by the time, I'm committed to going forward in the project alert with the other project. I'll find it somewhere within the budget for us to cut corners, somewhere to make sure this happens. That's fine.
How long does it take you to backfill that position? I mean, does it take you 2 or 3 months to get
That's
somebody?
actually a great question, Stephen. The reason I say it's a great question is we're backfilling 2 spots right now. One mine and one the promotion that came up through. So there's 2 open vacancies right now, so we just opened it up. It closed out the end of the month. We're just gathering the resumes now. So my thoughts are that we'll actually start a list. We'll hire 2 off of this list, and we'll have 3 and 4 ready to go. So if we did find the money for it,
Is,
Oh, you will have a candidate available.
I'll have a candidate
Oh, okay.
within 2 weeks.
if there are openings in the police force, is there money accruing there that you could tap?
We're filling with overtime
Overtime
just to
right now,
cover any
so-
vacancies,
So
so.
you'd eaten up the, that
it's-
money with, okay.
He's managing, I mean, we actually checked the budget today. He's managing the budget very well, but he's
That's why
backfilling the
school is
shifts.
a more viable option.
Yeah, well, it just seems if you're going to hire 2 new officers to fill the slots, and the SRO is imminent, something you really need to do, then that first new officer you hire should replace the guy you ship over for the SRO, for the second one.
But then I have to keep backfilling her spot with, or Megan's spot with overtime.
Yeah,
No, I
but you're
haven't.
going to end up doing that anyway. If you take that SRO out of your rotation now, before you get a new officer in rotation, then you've got more overtime to fill.
You're absolutely correct. It's just more overtime, I'm gonna keep filling.
So, I just,
Go ahead.
obviously, there's all kinds of good things for this, and it's great that it's brought forward and so on there. From a Fincom and from a budget standpoint, my only concern is that when you do this, because obviously this is great, we want to do this. If we did it as part of the annual budget, then you've got everybody's coming up forward and say, these are all the things we want to do, and then you have to decide which ones. And this is just, any one individually, of course we want to do it, we want to do them all. So that's the only rub with doing it this way, right?
No, absolutely.
So,
I totally agree with you. Again,
That's
it's
why I-
infantile stages, and then I
Right.
hit the ground running.
no, and you're right to bring it forward. I also just felt that we had to say it here, though, too.
No, it was my recommendation that he come forward.
Yep,
And I think, first thing was, we were thinking about the 2020 budget.
yep.
And then he got,
I went out on a
Cindy
limb.
Cindy went off the reservation. And,
Cindy didn't get the memo.
no, and truly, I mean, she spoke up eloquently
I think
on the
it's great.
subject,
No,
and she's passionate
Yeah.
about it. But I think that's why it's important for the selectmen and the school committee to come together and say, is it important enough for them to find $20,000 or $30,000 apiece to go forward? If it's not, then that tells you something.
But to me, the question isn't even, do we have $20,000 or $30,000 to do it this year? It's like,
Right.
is this the most important hire we want to make next year? Because this is going to say some other hire next year, we're not going to be able to do it.
Right.
Well, I
And
think
so is this, and that, to me, that's the, make sure
I
we
think-
understand that.
as a new chief, I mean, you came in, and a few months now, so you've,
Yeah, absolutely.
right, you've evaluated,
Yeah, yeah.
here's what you have, and now
Yeah.
you have, he's established that there's a need.
I agree.
And there's some
Yeah.
community backing behind this,
Yeah.
I've seen.
No, I have
did a little
to, I have to.
research, so-
Oh, I totally have.
And I admit, when the whole idea of an SRO, I thought it was just
And I just
school
got-
shootings, all of a sudden SROs start popping up. But then I got into a little bit of the research, shared information, and then I saw that, from
Yeah.
what it really pushes down to is the bullying in school starts to dissipate away. The mentoring piece to this, I wrote down, besides the security on site, the positive experience with an officer on campus, the education side of it, and here we are, we're coming into an area, we're gonna have recreational drugs in town for sale, just another,
I'm not questioning the value of it.
No, I know, but I
understand.
just think, I know we're gonna be looking at other
Yep.
budget numbers and other, people are gonna be coming forward. But I think this is a situation, at least from my perspective, that it makes a lot of sense with what he's come into, seeing the need. We talked enough, but like Fred said, I hope that the school committee and the schools can jump on board, and at least for this temporary piece.
Well, I-
Offset, I mean.
And like I said, I was approached by that parent group who was kind of held at bay prior to this, and I welcomed them to the station. I said, come on in, let's sit down, let's discuss, And again, I think they approached the school, and I think they approached the selectmen in the wrong avenue of this. They came in, we need to have armed security guards, we need to have this, this, and this. And it's so much more than that. And, I've kept them at bay, even though they have, close to 300 signatures. And I said, let us try to do this the proper way, so it's not a one and done kind of year. Let us approach this, logically and say, okay, can we go forward? Will the budget sustain this? And what are the outcomes and benefits we're gonna get from this? And they've all been on board. They've all, I said to them, please don't, start firing emails off and signatures to everybody. Funnel it through me. Let's do the proper channels. And that's why I'm before you
Okay,
today.
no,
Nancy.
that's great.
But again, to reiterate it, to your point, I think the reason to have both the selectmen and the school committee on board is they have virtually all of the employees of the town. There are very few that don't report to either of those two
True, yeah,
boards.
that's a good point.
So if they both agree that this is worth going forward with, then they can't come back and say, well, we didn't know that it was gonna cost us
Right.
$100,000 next year, right? So I really think that if we can get a dialogue going between now and the 24th,
Right.
and get buy-in between now and the 24th, then we maybe could do something in the fall town meeting. But
a good
otherwise, we'll have to
suggestion,
wait
you're
until May.
Thank you.
Okay,
I appreciate it.
good. Thank you, good luck.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, can we go to the cap? I'd just like to go to the Capitol so we can, we've got,
Take care of the chief.
we've got the Bobson twins waiting.
I can understand why.
What's your last name again? Oh, that's the one we were just hearing about.
No
She trained you? Did she train you?
I sat over there.
And last night, there were 3 items in capital, right? Okay. That's Article, what, 8, is it?
8.
It's on the front page.
And Marilyn, don't put that in the notes.
I have to say.
Right. Oh, yeah.
That's an easy one. Have a heart.
No, it's Sean, but I'm the only one that can speak German. I didn't get to meet him. I was all ready to say Guten Morgen, wie geht es Ihnen? It's the only thing I know.
But they couldn't speak highly enough. They came home, oh, I'm so glad you
Okay,
told
Bonnie,
us.
you got capital,
Sure.
and specifically the truck.
So I just put up the memo from the chief regarding the ladder truck, and I'll let the chief speak to that first.
So, the ladder truck, it's been on the capital project for the last 3 years.
What? What? First you're hearing, what? I've heard of
This is
it.
new info. So, hopefully we're not sounding like a broken record. But over the past 3 years, the deputy's been part of a committee. A few of the guys they've gone across the country. They've checked out the different manufacturers, the different options, really, doing our due diligence to find what is going to be the best for us for the next 25 to 30 years. We've come to the tower ladder type of a vehicle. It has a pump, it has a tank. It's a multifunctional vehicle. And it's, as we've been talking, about $1.2 million. We've applied for the AFG grant. We're anticipating that they will be done distributing money sometime in the next 2 weeks. Knock on wood, we still haven't heard no. However, we still haven't heard anything. So
Yes, do you have any idea how much money it would be?
if,
800
Okay. So real
something
money.
$1,000.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Significant.
town's contributed 20%. 5 is the minimum, we put in
It is,
20,
okay.
which has already been appropriated.
right, so we tried to increase the odds by giving a larger match. So as we near the end of that, it's looking kind of bleak, unfortunately. But until we actually hear no, it's still out there. So
It's bleak because they've said yes to some people and you haven't heard yet?
they've said yes to a lot.
A lot of people, okay, all right. Okay, just
But
wanna make
yeah, as we're nearing the end,
Okay.
you know, like I said, probably either this Friday or next Friday, it will most likely be the end of the AFG distributions. So, just in talking to the manufacturer, Debbie reached out and said, hey, you know, what do you have for demos? And over the last 12 to 18 months, they actually have 4 in production. One of them meets the majority of what we're looking for. Tank size, pump capacity, engine size, has a few more bells and whistles than what we'd usually look for because it's a demo. And they, you know, put the fancy things on those and just to show them off as they take them from show to show. And one of these, this particular demo comes offline within the first quarter of the year. And it's in the ballpark of $1 million, $1,010,000. And it has the potential of saving us in the long run between $200,000 and $300,000. If this comes forward in the spring, and for a spec vehicle, the spec model last year was 1.2. They're saying it's a 3 to 5% increase, so it's going to be more coming up next year, but it also takes 18 months to build. If it's approved in May at annual town meeting, you're looking at 18 months before it's done. So it's a long build time for these trucks. And the advantage of going to the demo, it meets our needs, has some of the key components, saves us $200,000 to $300,000, and it would be ready in a matter of months and not 18 months, within the first quarter.
Yep.
So what year is the demo and how many miles is on it?
It's in production right now. It's still in production.
Production?
Yeah.
Not
So
demonstrated anything yet.
it has, right, it hasn't. And just, I mean, you can explain a little more on it.
So they're gonna, all the manufacturers are gonna take their template and they're gonna make trucks for the different shows nationally that they show them at. In this particular instance, we were asked to there was an opportunity for some possible funding, but you had to have a project ready, you had to have it ready by the end of June of 19. So when I reached out, I went on their website and looked to see what they had, and then called the salesman, and here's this particular one. So it's a demo in the aspect that they're building it to their demo spec, as opposed to our spec. But we have the ability to put a hold on it, and when it's done, it's ours. It's not gonna go to this show and to that show and driven all over the country. It's gonna get manufactured, we're gonna fly out, we're gonna look at it and say, perfect, and it's gonna be driven out to New England.
Why would they do that? Why, if they got 18,
There's-
people waiting 18 months for a truck, why would they do that?
They're selling it. They'll
They're-
make another one.
Right.
It's not being produced for a department, it's being produced for.
But it's
a-
never gonna be used for that, right? Why, I
They'll
don't,
build
what am I
another
missing?
one. They'll build another one.
Probably
like
demos,
18
probably
months.
They build
demos
four
are
of
the
them a
wrong
year.
word to use for this.
Yeah,
right?
it's not
Because-
demos,
They're not
it's building it
spec
for a
trucks.
spec.
So
Yeah.
they're just
Right,
Spec
right.
truck.
You know what I'm saying? To build a spec costs a little money, you
Yeah.
gotta add things, take
I
things
guess
out.
It's not
Right.
customized.
It's like buying the TV at Best Buy that's just sitting there that they have out.
Yeah, but they've been using
That's
that.
not-
It didn't get there.
Anyway.
Exactly.
That's his point.
And it's just it's an opportunity
Fair
to take a truck right off the line that's supposed to be doing the tour of shows, but we'd actually get it even, prior to prior to it going out in the show.
There are 20 people standing in line saying, rather than waiting 18 months, I want that one.
Well, that's
That-
just it.
that's a risk.
That's a
That-
risk. you
that's
take.
totally a
If-
risk.
if You can do, according to the salesperson that we bought other trucks from, October 1st, we can say to him, put a hold on that truck, and it's 30-day hold, which means they won't sell it in 30 days. If, at the end of October, if it doesn't get approved, then it just goes back into their schedule, and it is what it is. I mean, it's not, it's kind of like saying they're gonna make 4 different colors of a pickup truck, and somebody wants the red one. Well, the red one's gonna be done in December, you can have that one, and then in January, they're gonna make the red one again. That's just what they do. This isn't being made for anyone except for the manufacturer to have a demo unit.
So we currently have 200,000 that we put in.
Appropriated.
Now, when would it be appropriated again, that 200,000?
It's already appropriated, so it's
We
there.
said we were gonna do this every year, I think. Did we not? We were gonna, say this got pushed out if we were waiting.
Yeah,
were-
we appropriated this 200,000
To
so
match
that
the
they could
grant.
match the
To
grant.
match the grant.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought we also talked about putting,
We put money into capital stabilization last year with the idea that we have plenty of things that are vying for those dollars, including the ladder truck, building projects, and the like. So on that note, my funding recommendation, which I'll go through in the financial update, we have a couple of items in request for funding for the special
Yeah.
town meeting.
Yeah.
And I have a few different funding sources, so just to quickly segue for that, for you guys. I have about 609,000 in potential one-time available funding, and that comes from 175,000 remaining in snow and ice funds. I have about 133,000 in the old fuel facility article that I think we're done with, so as long as Chris says that we're done with it, we could release that and reappropriate that for another purpose. And I've also asked the Board of Assessors to look at the overlay accounts to see if there's any amounts that can be released. Last year, they released a pretty large amount, it was about 500,000. I think that we can get at least 300,000 and be safe in kind of earmarking that, but I'll know after their meeting on the 20th what the actual amount will be released. So if I use that figure, that comes to $609,000. What we have vying for dollars are 201,000 for signal upgrades at the high school, 42,000 that you heard from Mr. Zeldin tonight for Master Plan Implementation Committee for zoning services, and the 810,000, which is the balance between the 200,000 that we've already appropriated and the $1.010 million price for the ladder truck demo. Again, saving $200,000 to $300,000 in cost and 18 months in time. So if I, just net the two against each other, that's a delta that I'm short of 444,000. So where the delta's so small, I would, rather than take money out of capital stabilization, I'd rather just issue a short-term note and pay it off over 2 to 3 years. Rates are still low enough that I think that that's a better option. Still requires a 2/3 vote no matter which way you go. If you take it out of capital stabilization, it's 2/3. But we know that we have building and facility needs that are on the horizon, and I don't know how quickly on the horizon or how far out. So I'd rather not take money out of capital stabilization just yet, where, we could pretty easily accomplish it with a short-term borrowing.
Is
for
this
this
a debt
job.
exclusion thing?
No,
it's not.
inside, I manage it with the capital
Inside.
plan funding,
Okay.
just over a couple of years, a short
you
short
said
period.
300,000? Well, last year we got 500,000.
Right. I'm
So
pretty
you being
keen on-
conservative, or you?
I'm being conservative.
You
It
are.
might be more. And if it's more, then we borrow less,
So Chief, is there a truck that's gonna be retired when this one comes online?
The ladder. This will replace the ladder truck.
So is there,
1988
It's,
letter.
it's a 30-year-old truck this year.
is there some kind of, can you sell that and get some money back from it, or how does that work?
So there's two things. It's the last one of its model in the country. The manufacturer will not supply
it to
any
Meach.
parts
Give it to
or
Meach.
repairs to it any longer. If we were to get the grant specifications, you need to outline how the truck will be scrapped. It cannot be sold, it cannot be used, it has to be scrapped. That's if we get the grant. If we buy it through a dealer, we may get $10,000 or
Trade.
$15,000.
Or we do it through the
Through the
municipal bid.
auction.
Yeah, or the municipal bid and we auction it off.
Which, a website now that we've used for some of our other stuff, and amazing what people are paying for.
Yeah.
All you put is pictures on and say, it's in this condition, the bid starts at this, and it closes.
Right.
Right.
So
Now
there's
they
a
have $4
potential
million.
to get something.
I would say 10,000,
Something, yeah.
10 to 15,000 would be my guess, that they probably worked into the price of the new truck somehow or another.
Right.
So there's a lot, it surprises me, the grant process. We're sitting here with a 30-year-old lateral.
Yeah,
How
absolutely.
can't you be close to the top of the grant?
Because each
Yeah.
year, they focus on a different aspect of firefighting. This year, it might be air packs, so they're gonna say, when they give you high priority, medium, and low. And if ladder trucks and low, they're funding high priority, medium priority, and then at the end, if there's money left. And that's truly what it comes down to, because you get into safety aspects, but also they're looking at your financial need.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why we put the 20% in, rather than saying we can match 5%, which fortunately we can match 20, but it also, I don't know, it's hard to make us look poor. I don't know, maybe we should lie more.
The good news is we're in good financial shape.
That's
The
right,
bad
that's
news is
right.
you're
Right.
in
Right.
financial shape.
No, that's
So,
right.
Correct,
I mean, that's-
exactly.
So,
I hate borrowing.
I have a question
yeah,
to Bonnie. The 444, that's the price, assuming we don't get the grant?
That's assuming that we do not get the grant.
If we get the grant, it's less than
How much so?
444,
Yeah.
right?
I mean,
If we get the grant, it could be in the ballpark of 800. The grant would be 800, and the 200 that's already allocated would,
buys the
Now we're
truck.
done.
yeah,
Then we're not having this conversation.
correct.
and again, if the overlay release is higher, then, this amount would be, the 444 would be lower. I just need to get the actual figure after they meet on the 20th.
Right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but last night, one of the selectmen had a little agita over going, quote, off-cycle for something of this size, and wanted to maybe come back and revisit it in May. And chief and deputy, tried to explain that this particular truck probably won't be there in May. And basically, we can try to do $1 million now, or $1.2 million plus or minus in May. $1.4 million, okay.
Well, it's
So-
not only the
And
bucks
maintenance
involved,
on
but
this
you're
truck
talking
for
about
2 years after that.
2 years.
Absolutely.
waiting almost
Never
2
gonna
years
make
to
2
get the
years.
truck.
Right now, we're at a point where a couple of weeks ago, it went to repair in Boxborough because we were doing its weekly check, and we had 2 puddles of oil under it this big. So we went over there, and he said, all right, he checked it out. He does not want to get into the repair. He says, just keep feeding it oil. Because they're afraid that when they get into disassembling the engine, they're going to get into a whole engine rebuild. So it's significant. It's not hurting it right now, as long as we keep feeding it.
Well, that's the
It'll
problem
be-
with the
it'll-
fire truck.
you know.
I think this is why it's been kicked down the road as
Right.
far as it is, because
Yeah.
just keep feeding it the oil and we'll keep it going. And then you have the mindset of, well, we don't want a ladder truck anyway. And
It's a lot of money.
So you've got all these negative influences against it, right? So, and it is something we just keep pushing down.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that you could theoretically never do, and you would just keep pushing it out until the thing.
Right.
Well,
Till they
so, and I don't,
I get the.
I don't think we've ever really talked about it this way, but say the can was kicked down the road continuously, and it went out of service, and say it wasn't replaced. At that point, it would affect your insurance company, your insurance ratings for your homes. Without the ladder, your individual insurance would go up $30 to $40 per household. Right now, with the demographics of our community and the population, the insurance services ratings requires us to have 3 Class A pumps and a ladder truck to service a community this size. So if it were to grow, if the demographics, the construction, the amount, as that changes and increases, those numbers could change by what the insurance companies require
What would be
for
the-
equipment.
Excuse me, what would be, along those same lines, what would be the impact on NIBM or the point by not having the ladder? is, I mean, you know, if it's 30 or 40 bucks a house, you probably won't notice it, but if IBM,
The hotel.
Yeah,
I
the
couldn't,
hotel.
I don't have that answer.
Theater, the hotel.
yeah, that's,
You know, right now, if that were to happen, we would rely heavily on mutual aid. Every single fire alarm, we would have a mutual aid ladder responding from a community. And those communities are only going to tolerate supplying mutual aid for so long, especially when it
when
comes
you
on a
can't
regular basis.
reciprocate, right.
I think that was a good question. You ought to come up with an answer for, because it will certainly help your case against people who are wanting to hold off. The question about the point and IBM specifically, what would do with their insurance?
So they, in the conversation with the insurance company, this was just in the last few weeks, one of the things that we wanted to analyze was, what if we were to get rid of a pump? And this is a Quint, this has a pump and water on it, and we went to 2 pumps and had the ladder as the third. It would eventually, they would only give us partial credit for the pump, partial credit for a ladder. So our points would go down. Unfortunately, we rank 63 is our number. And if we go below 60, our insurance prices would go up. If we have this truck and we have the ability to improve on a few other things that we do, training, equipment, things like that, and we can show that our numbers are going up, the higher our number goes up, then the ratings go down, or the insurance costs go down. So unfortunately, we weren't like in the middle of the 60s, we're in the low end as it is, and if we were to eliminate one of them, we would be into potentially in the high 50s, which would have an impact to our community as far as cost. They would not give us specific numbers. They threw out a $30 to $40 potential increase per household that would kick in a year or two after they figured. If we never got it, that's just, you know, if, say, we didn't have a ladder truck anymore and there was no desire to get one. But they would not give us specific numbers for buildings, different facilities, different venues in town. So I think that would be very difficult to pull up those numbers.
Chief, question for you. Let's say that we get this grant approved or we fund it, get you the ladder truck. What's next for capital for you and how soon?
The air packs are up this spring and an ambulance
Okay. And how soon for the ambulance?
this spring.
Sure.
This ladder truck was put off 3 years, so unfortunately, that's the impacts.
What about beyond these, I mean, how much, what about your other equipment? Major
After this, it's just ambulance, there'd be another ambulance in a couple of years, and a couple pickup trucks, but there's
No more $500,000.
No.
Till the ambulances become
We
$500,000.
have a.
Yeah, what's an ambulance cost nowadays?
Yeah, about 350, right?
Yeah, but it's being used to offset the increases
$350,000.
providing.
Is that all outfitted for ALS then?
Yes.
Yeah.
In the
There's
last 2
new requirements.
ambulances we
And
bought.
what are you gonna need for air packs? What are you gonna request for air packs?
240,
Yeah, I think it's around,
240,000. We're trying to get a grant for that now.
And Chief, along the lines of insurance discussions, at what point do we need to add more equipment based on the growth that's happening in town? Is there any?
right now, no. Yeah, we're in good shape. It's just having the personnel to operate everything,
Got it.
all of the equipment.
So you mean more
We are in
personnel?
good shape. We're in good shape equipment-wise. We're not even remotely looking at adding engines or additional apparatus, no.
Refurbish.
Please, I hope I didn't come across that, you know.
Well, no, I was just curious. I mean, we just had the presentation. We're gonna get significant tax revenues coming in, so we can afford.
No.
No, this is, well, that's one of the things we were just talking about is, you know, we keep projecting and we're talking that this sustainment of our upward trend is probably peaking. And that's what worries me with things like this, is that you don't want to catch this on the downside when you have to have it, right? so I'm not getting into the political side of it, you deal with that on Monday night. But from the financial side of it, I hate borrowing for things like this, but
This is the way I want to borrow.
Right.
3 years, it's not,
yeah.
it's not a permanent issue.
Short-term lower
Yeah.
interest rates. What are the
This is
interest
the right.
rates? What are the interest rates running?
They're creeping up, but I think, they're,
Twos?
I'm just under 2,
Just under 2?
yeah. Just for bands.
I agree
Look
where
at
you are
the
though in
C-
terms of the timing.
If you just watch
Really should do
the
it.
midterm CD rates at your bank, it's
Pretty much the
virtually,
same.
it tracks, it just does. And
I gotta run, so.
Okay.
Good to see you, Steve.
So they plan on the 24th, if you can make it?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah,
great,
definitely.
thank you. All righty. Again, I think, the selectmen begged off on voting, right?
No,
They
they-
vo- they voted
It's
on
on,
it,
they
It's
just,
on-
it's up for
on the
discussion
warrant,
now.
But at the 24th, they'll have the full board.
and then they'll
Then
vote
it's-
to
then it's a-
go or no, okay.
So,
And we meet on the 2nd, we'll vote then.
did you have the financial plan last night, too, that you just discussed with us?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep, you have a memo in there with the fall funding.
okay.
Yeah.
One more question,
Yeah,
John.
yeah.
When's the grant when's the grant end or the announcement for the potential?
By next
The AFG, yeah, probably with either this week or next week.
Next week, okay.
Let's assume the worst.
Yeah, assume not, sound like.
Well, we could have very good news in the next.
If it happens, you'll all know, I'm sure.
Well,
It's
here
easy to
you
withdraw
right.
the article.
Right.
He'll give
You
you a
can
ride
blow that
on
horn. Oh, you don't have that anymore. The new whistle, right?
I'll have to put that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, the only other capital that was looked at last night was a $201,000 request for the traffic light down by the high school. And again, that was quite a lively discussion. And
There was a grant for that, too, right?
no,
No, it's not, any money?
The state's not covering that?
no, no.
It's on state road.
The state's just allowing us to do
The
it.
state is allowing us to spend $200,000 on a
Isn't
light.
that
How
special?
nice of them.
Yeah, that's,
They don't object.
All that air traffic.
right.
So you do have this in your packet, in your warrant packet, but you do have the price breakout for the $201,804. So you can take a look at it if you want
Does
to.
this include the statue of Millie on the corner?
Yeah, exactly.
Boy, we should have put a hologram of her out there.
Hey, Bonnie, I have a question. Is there any traffic accident records or anything that's driving this, or is it more just to not use the police resource that's driving the need for the traffic light?
I don't know if there's traffic data, that's backing this up. I do know that it's been requested by the school committee and by the highway department and by the selectmen. Originally, it did not meet all of the criteria that Mass DOT requires in order to allow the signal to come in. But after meeting with them, and I think even on-site,
Then they tried to get out of there.
they tried to get out and couldn't take a left.
Take a left.
And that kind of convinced them that maybe this was a
They
good,
might have heard me swear a
viable
few times.
project.
If you talk to anyone, like my daughter is now taking my grandson to the high school. This is his first year in high school. And she said, when did King Street become a parking lot? So it takes me 45 minutes to take him there and go back home, and she lives in the Common.
I know, believe me, I know.
My understanding is it would be a short cycle light, so it's not, your standard,
So it'd be
gap of letting people go through. It would be a short cycle, it would cycle more frequently.
Yeah, it would have to with the other light right
Right,
there.
exactly.
Otherwise he'd cause a,
But there were some concerns brought up by residents of New Estate Road in particular that were attending the meeting last night.
Well, they're already seeing people going around the light
oh, absolutely.
on, down by,
Well,
Soccer field, they go all around
King
the soccer
Street.
field, yeah.
yeah, they go up and over, and now that we paved it, it's a racetrack.
of course.
And,
So I think that
That'd be
they
neat.
want to have some more questions answered by Mass DOT on how that is going to impact that light on the corner there by the gas station, and, just to ensure that there's not going to be a worse problem created by solving a problem you know,
I
high school.
would think that they have it so that it's got the magnetic trip on it, so.
I would think so,
I
but
mean, school's only.
Just to get
it's a
some
few hours out of the
definitive
morning and
answers,
the
yes.
afternoon, right? Really where the issue lies.
And they did acknowledge that, you know, they're inexperienced drivers that they're dealing with at that particular, you know, time. You know, it's all high school students trying to cut across, you know, traffic, so.
Put a rotary in.
There you go. Slow it down a little bit.
That works so well.
Yeah, Paul wants to put one on at Foster Street in Harwood, the circle there.
Yeah.
I think he does not want to put
But,
that.
No, it is, but it is a problem, because the traffic buildup is unbelievable anyway.
Right.
And then you add now schools to it.
Our little town's turning into a city.
Like you said, we're talking about literally half hour in the morning and a half hour in the afternoon, right? That's the cycle of the getting
But it's
everyone to school,
also
everyone goes at the same time.
Commuter hours for
Right, and that's
adults
why
going to work.
that's why it's trouble.
Because
But
my
they're not
daughter
gonna
used
trip
to take the
that, but they
kids
won't trip that light though most of the
7 o'clock
time,
to the high
so
school, and they
it really
should
is minimal.
get
Right.
out.
From that.
Kids can stay.
That's what I mean, so it's not the rest of the day, it's really, most of the time it'll just stay.
right.
Well, even the other light at where the gas station is, that's right down there, that's also just tripped by King Street coming in too, so.
Yep.
So that's the other one that may spark some discussion on the 24th.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But,
I don't understand why
you know,
there's
I
no discussion
don't see
actually.
why it should be that big a deal, but Bonnie basically
kid, right?
has the
$200,000
mechanism
get one
to
kid's
cover
life,
it
yeah.
if we so choose to support it.
Right, but
But-
theoretically, this is up against the fire truck if we hadn't discussed this already. I
Right.
mean, it is
Right, yeah, absolutely.
the same.
Yep. Okay. Want to just quickly walk through the warrant and
Sure, so,
Bonnie, sorry, one more thing on this. We talked about the fire truck being kicked down the road or not. What's the ramifications of this being kicked down the road a year?
it may cost more.
or a kid getting killed.
You know, right now, it's Mass DOT giving us the pricing,
Yeah.
so, you know, their pricing may be higher in the spring. I'm sure it won't be lower.
Okay.
We'll take all their cars away and put them on school buses.
No, I'm just looking at that's
Yeah,
$201.
no, yeah.
$202,000 to a fire engine right there. I mean,
Yeah, it could be certainly more a year from now, sure.
I'm sure there's a part of this that, you know, maybe they would get their bids out. I'm sure they bid their projects in a, you know, certain time frame. So maybe they would
Yeah.
bid this for the spring and have the work done as soon as school is done out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they
putting
were
it
saying-
later might, you know, it could
They were
delay
saying
that
they
cycle.
would try to have this done during the summer, was the idea. But that was just the discussion last night at the meeting, so. Okay.
no, I recognize it as a problem. I just didn't know if there was something tied to it where it's now, I mean, it's a safety issue anyway, but it's always been, since the school's been there. And it's, you know, which one?
And, yeah, and to that point, have we had any accidents there?
Well, that's
I don't know.
the question that I had.
So you have this summary sheet here for the warrant. The selectmen did vote last night to insert all of the articles listed, 1 through 12. The only change is Article 8, instead of that master plan implementation article at 35, it was 42.
I had that question actually underlined. I was wondering why.
And on Article 8, the selectmen unanimously voted to insert all of the articles with the exception of 8A and C, which was the traffic signal and fire ladder truck. That was a 2-1 vote. Chase wanted to, you know, maybe consider putting that off until the spring for those 2 items, just because they were out of cycle, as you had mentioned.
Because it was such a big number.
Well, we got the 2.2 million on there, so it's not bigger than that.
That's a good point. Fair
Leave it
enough.
on there. Just my thought.
Okay, number 7 was transfer the highway department, the lot down on Whitcomb Ave that is surrounded by the water property.
Is that the trees?
No, it's a
Uh,
field.
You know where the garage is down there, highway garage?
That's the old building.
And
Yeah.
they would like to have that property transferred for the water department for the new treatment facility for
Very
that
nice.
well, we approved in last May's meeting, $7 million borrowing authorization for the water department to upgrade that well and put treatment in so that all the water would be treated.
So in this map, this property here
They already
is
have.
all water department property. This is town property. So it's like a little island and.
Where's the asbestos in the building? Is that?
Yes, right.
We're
yeah.
transferring
the water department is
problem
town
or-
also.
It'll go away.
But it's actually,
Because that
it's
building will
all
come down,
town, but
probably.
it's
That's
water,
covered.
under the
That's
water
covered.
department's control.
Okay.
Where this is under the selectmen's control.
Okay, so we
Okay?
would,
So the water department is undergoing that $7 million project. As part of that, this building needs to come down.
yeah,
They are taking ownership of taking this building down as part of that project, which has some asbestos remediation that the town would otherwise have to bear the cost of, so.
We are.
Now, the question is.
oh, I remember that discussion.
Right, and the issue that came up, that highway and light and water, at least I think we're looking at, was what could they do to alleviate the storage problem for what they have in there? They do use it for somewhat sort of active storage, so. if they-
Plows and they
yeah,
store
if-
plows and
If they can figure out how to handle that, then this is really kind of a no-brainer, I think.
Yeah. Seems to make
And the
sense.
town meeting vote would be worded, I think, Anthony, so that it would be transferred when the selectmen declared it surplus. So it wouldn't happen right after town meeting, it would be when all of those details were worked out and the selectmen said it's surplus property, it goes to the water department.
Right.
Creates more parking there for the VFW too.
Well, there you go, right. Well, they can purify the beer that goes in a VFW in the same ROUF system.
So, this just reminds me, I think what the discussion was, maybe it was out here when we were talking about the library, and some was school land, and did it have to go here or there or something else? This is a similar kind of thing, somehow it's designated, but here there's, nobody's arguing saying, no, it's mine, you can't have it.
No, this is very clear in the deeds and the way that the property description cards are marked. That's controlled by the selectmen, and all the property around it is controlled by the water department. And it's over in Aquifer, and, I mean,
Makes sense.
it's
to
water
me.
department.
A lot of things make sense, it doesn't mean people agree to it. So nobody's disagreeing, nobody, the
Doesn't
selectmen
appear
are
to.
saying,
I think
okay.
that-
No, as long
Okay,
as
all right,
the
just
storage
trying to understand.
things can be worked out,
The
which it
landmines
sounds
are,
like it
okay.
it can be.
Okay.
Okay.
Thought they'd be a little more possessive. That group.
Well, if we keep it, then we have to take the building down.
Yeah.
No, that's a win-win, that's good.
So the other articles, we've got bills of prior year, I don't have any yet, I'm not anticipating any, but we always keep it on there just in case. Budget amendments, there are, the main one will be for the police budget to cover the 2 dispatchers that were hired, and that we're gonna offset that out of ambulance receipts. That was something that was agreed to in the summer. They funded it through a grant, some of their 911 grants, just to get us through fall town meeting. But in order to sustain that, we need to appropriate the money out of the ambulance receipts. It is available, so it's not an issue, but we do need to make the appropriation. The other
ambulance
item,
Receipts were gonna cover the EMTs, no?
they're covering the cost of providing ALS service.
Or ALS.
The additional dispatchers are required because now that we're running ALS, we also control the dispatch functions that go with that, which include EMD or emergency management dispatch, which used to be handled by Pro EMS when they handled the ALS stuff. So because that's part of this, it's part of the paramedic program. So it is gonna come out of the ambulance receipts for that.
Now,
There's
excuse me,
another request.
Yeah, excuse me, this is an aside, but when will you have numbers on how the ALS collections versus budget versus?
Not
what-
till, we won't have that as far as the ALS impact. I won't really see anything until December because of the lag time in collecting, medical,
Okay, but-
payments.
sort of
By
on a
December, I
quar-
should have a good quarter.
Okay, but if we should start looking at a quarterly report on that.
Yeah, I already committed to bringing a December 31st report back to the selectmen and
Yeah.
everybody to show them how it's starting to trend.
Are they getting the call volumes they expected to get?
My understanding is yes. they've
I
been-
see the ambulance go by
Yeah.
my house almost
Yeah.
daily. they're getting calls.
We hear them from here. It's
No,
like,
I know, but that's not,
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
but that's not saying they're getting called a lot, isn't saying they're at the volume that they expected to get, and that's.
That's true.
So we'll see what.
Yeah, we'll have an
let the
update.
numbers speak, right? I
Yeah,
mean, there was
you can, but-
a business plan, and we'll
Is
see
there any
how.
way we can get any data before town meeting so
Well,
we kind of
that's
know?
what
We
I
can
said,
use-
if we
apply
could just
some
get the
logic.
volume, you
collecting
can get numbers, you can get
Revenue,
volumes.
I mean, you could, the chief can give you call volume. I can't give you revenue stuff because, I mean, the lag time on that is like a quarter behind in
So
collecting
we
those
have
things.
we have nothing to look at whatsoever.
I can tell you where you are for, ending June 30th, but we weren't running ALS back then.
Right.
So, but call volume, I'm sure the chief has that data at his fingertips, because that's all in his software.
It'd just be good to kind of get a gauge as to how that's going. If we're gonna vote on something.
Yeah,
and
I'm
throw
sure
the
he can.
money around, it'd be nice to know.
I'm sure he can give you the call volume. Let's see, other budget amendments, there's a request to provide some support operationally to the VFW, kind of like we did a few years ago. There are some state statutes that have restrictions on what you can do and what you can't do. You can't just give them money, for anything. It has to be to provide support, like facility support. It can't be, to pay for the booze, the whatever. But you can provide monies to pay for electricity or rent or things like that.
Not for operational costs.
Operational costs. So Tom Harrington is going through the statute because it's pretty lengthy. There's calculations that are tied to your total equalized valuation, depending on the town size that you're in. So I said, you figure that out and tell me what we can do. But it's my understanding that they are looking at a targeted, support operational items to help.
Now, this,
How much?
this post is not just Littleton, right?
Correct.
So is anybody talking, who were the other towns that this post is supposed to cover?
Acton, Harvard, Foxborough, I believe.
So is anybody talking to the other towns to see if they care about the brew pub the way we care about the brew pub? Or, I mean, I love our veterans, but
Yeah, I think it's more, I know John's been talked to about it. This is kind of a testing bed for us to see how it goes, and then he could approach other towns as kind of saying the same thing, which would help offset what I think Littleton was trying to do.
It's not an unusual item that
No,
towns
it isn't.
funds.
Other towns do
they-
it. That's
no, I don't have an issue with that, but
Yeah.
if this is a post that covers Acton, that's at least 2 times the size of Littleton, it must have 2 times the number of that we have, and, why couldn't they help? Or why wouldn't they be interested in helping?
How much money are we talking?
I haven't been given an amount at this
Any
point.
idea?
I would say it would probably be around 10,000,
$500,000.
yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think the statute's
That's the
gonna allow
cost
you
of
to
a fire
do
truck.
ridiculous amounts of money. But, so that is one that's on the
We'll
horizon.
park the old fire truck down there with the ladder up right beside the cannon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, the value of just some of the other, there's a lot more. I mean, you can go to the VFW website and see all the other things that they do. I know it always gets hung up, though, it's a bar. But, as far as the function facility for a lot of different things, and
Well, I have no
then the
issues.
support of veterans.
Yeah, no, I
with
have no
being
issues
disabilities.
supporting it, but if it was a Littleton VFW, then Littleton is the only potential
Right, but I think-
source.
I
But
think-
if Acton and Boxborough
I think,
and Harvard are also
Yep.
in that consortium,
Agreed.
why not have them help?
And I think they should.
And that could actually maybe help put you over the top.
Agreed.
But it's also a good point, though, if we're not kicking in, we probably can't really very well ask them to,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no, absolutely,
yeah.
yeah. No,
Yeah.
I'm fine with that, yeah. Okay.
I wouldn't be able to vote on that article if it were.
And then we have the collective bargaining agreement for the firefighters union. Happy to say that that's been ratified. Yay. So I had already had that funding reserved. It really hasn't changed, so it's just,
Good.
we'll appropriate it at this point. Article 4 is local excise on retail sales of marijuana for adult use, the 3%, that's
Now,
allowed.
is there, sorry, go ahead.
Is that the max, 3%?
I believe so. I think it is. That's the local max.
It's a local max?
Yes, because there's a state you know.
Is that funded the same way like the meals taxes? It just comes from the state?
Yeah, it'll get collected through the state and then sent back to us.
And is there, can we put an earmark on that?
I'm sure you can.
I don't know what we would earmark it for, but rather than just let it
SRO.
disappear. Well,
That was too easy.
why not?
I think there are some restrictions on doing earmarks on it, like CPC is an allowed earmark, because when you're allowed to do that additional funding into CPC, that would be one that, you know, because you can do the meals and the room excise tax to that. I'm sure you can't point it to an operating budget, because everything is a general fund receipt, and then it gets appropriated by town meeting, so it's, unless you create some, you know, allowed.
Well, could we
revolving
look
fund.
at what we're generating for, now that we actually have restaurants in town, that have people going to them?
It's about
There's gotta be,
250,000 a year.
and room tax, there's gotta be,
That's about 270.
It's like 30 homes
Yeah.
worth of
yeah, no, but,
tax.
right, well,
That's how I look,
basically.
I always,
No, absolutely, it's
Yeah.
not just the,
Yeah, it's not,
but, you know, should
No,
we
not
just
really.
let that go into the operating budget?
Yeah.
Or should we,
It already is.
well, it's in the operating budget, so.
well, then maybe incremental should go in, should be earmarked for something else? I mean, rather than just let it flow in.
Well, our financial policies address, you know, revenues, and that it doesn't all just flow in. We keep, you know, 10%, we don't
Yeah,
appropriate it, it, you know, goes to replenish free cash.
That those policies were put in place before we had the meals tax, before we had all
okay,
the
now we're going back to
taxes.
we gotta review the bylaws.
Right, but if you're, but I just caution, if you're gonna carve it out, then that's a budget cut, it's a revenue cut.
Okay.
So, just,
Carve it out and put it into drug addiction.
Well, if you go back to the meals tax and so on, but if you're talking about the
This- no,
marijuana thing,
absolutely.
that's going forward, and so that would be an
That's-
easy
but
thing.
that's the point, is
Right.
anything new.
Right.
Rather than just let it flow into the operating budget, maybe we should look at
put it into
earmarking it to
capital
some.
stabilization.
Well, we can do that, or whatever,
Yeah.
but we should at least discuss it, I think.
I agree.
Yeah, it could be a lot. I mean, I don't know how, I have no idea. Nobody has any idea.
Talk to the weed smokers, they'll tell you.
Well, a lot of it'll be outside Littleton, I mean, it's
Right,
not,
right.
Yeah.
that's a,
The 10 million comes back.
yeah. I mean, the Mango Grill is now one, I don't know if you go through it, Ayers facilities where the Mango Grill.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
I have to run at 9, so I'm just gonna drill.
That's
through
where the
this
green
fast.
All right.
haze.
Road acceptance, Foster Street to Taylor Street, Taylor Street to Harwood. So we've owned this road, for, you know, we've managed this road, we've paved this road, but we've never actually taken this road by town meeting. And it's because it's a pre-1846 or whatever, there's a particular year. Yeah, so we just never had a town meeting actually accept it. So the deeds are already in place, so the deeds exclude the road. It just, we need to have the town meeting accept the road, and then we can use state money to do the improvements that
We
we
don't
want
want
to
you
do.
guys up there.
It's been a private way all these years.
Add Wilson Lane to that
Yeah, I
list.
wish you would. I wish you would, believe me.
Okay.
Let's see, transfer ownership of Durkey Farm parcels to Town of Littleton. So there's 2 parcels. There are more coming, but there are 2 that are ready to be transferred to the town, and they're on the front end.
Yeah,
As you
I
come
saw
in Spruce or something.
You're right on the left, kind of a
Yeah.
buffer zone between Foster Street.
Yep.
They're not really, they're wet, yes. They're not really buildable, usable
Can be
lots,
parking,
but,
huh?
well, there are some coming up later on the back end of the development that might be able to be utilized for things like parking. But they're not in this particular. Then we have the capital items that we discussed. The common smart sewer design and construction, that's the borrowing authorization for 2.2 million.
Here we go, buckaroos.
Yep, buckle up.
Okay.
And then we have some zoning amendments, amend accessory apartments, but, I mean, you guys can, you don't usually weigh in on those.
And I'm sorry, the sewer, this is also inside the levy, or this is exclusion?
This is my understanding inside.
Why,
I expected that answer,
How?
given the proponents.
why?
Okay, sorry, keep going, I know you gotta get out of here.
And then the last one is to amend town bylaws to allow alcohol on town property. So this would be.
Drink on the common.
There you go. This would be to allow for, like, say Park and Rec wanted to have a beer truck festival on Fay Park. I'm not saying that they do, but if they did, right now we can't because our bylaws say that you can't have
As
any.
far as like third Thursdays, they could have a
Right.
little area.
Exactly.
Sell some wine, booze, or whatever.
It doesn't mean that you could have alcohol on any property. It would be governed by the department that controls the property. So the school department would decide what areas, if any, that they would allow it on their properties. The selectmen would decide, you know,
kids
if
would
Fay
know
Park
where
were
they
not
could drink.
appropriate and they decided we don't.
So it's a blanket, it's okay for Fay Park, or it's okay, we give a special permit to do it on this day for Fay Park?
Well, we already have that process, which the bylaw, the old way, it really didn't make a whole lot of sense. It was almost like a really stern Puritan bylaw, if you
Yeah.
will, because we already regulate that. You already have to go get a permit to do it.
The rec board would have to approve that, but it still ultimately has to come with a selectmen
Right.
to issue that one day. So the
Yep.
selectmen are always gonna have a say in any event like
Okay,
that.
that's what, so we're not, we wouldn't say, okay, it's okay to have a beer on
No,
Fay Park
no,
if you go down there,
no.
no, okay.
No, absolutely not.
Oh, so I can't drink on the common.
Only if they're
get a
having a
permit.
permanent event.
Okay. Didn't understand that.
Yeah,
We'll email you an application.
yeah. Perpetual.
Brown bag it.
And the last thing I have here is the reserve fund transfer request for the highway department. So, you may know or not, I'm sure everybody knows, Jimmy Clyde is retiring the end of the year. His plan was to go out sometime in November, and then he has vacation that he's gonna use through the end of December, but that would be kind of his transition out. Chris is concerned, as well as, you know, I think anybody else that knows the amount of work that Jimmy does and the institutional knowledge, that he would really like to have some crossover training with a new employee with Jimmy. And again, Jimmy's gonna be gone, say, the last 5 weeks, so he'll be gone sometime in mid-November, and we still have to pay him through the end of December, so that's budget dollars. Chris doesn't have it budgeted to overlap two, you know, operational managers. So we did some calculations, and the shortage, you know, based on Jim's current rate, and, you know, going out the end of December and bringing somebody new at a lower rate, he can cover, you know, a certain part of that, but he can't cover all of it. So to overlap, he needs about, it's about a $9,670 shortage. He's only looking for $8,000 at this point because, you know, there's other things in flux with his budget. He thinks he can, you know, manage. We would put it into that line item for that particular position, so it couldn't be spent on, you know, another position or anything else. But I think it would be beneficial for short money, for $8,000, to allow for some of that knowledge
Well,
transfer.
if he's hiring somebody at a lower rate, then from January 1st through June 30th, he's saving the delta
Right, and he's,
between Jimmy.
Oh,
but he's
goodness,
not
yeah.
getting any crossover.
No,
Oh,
he's
no,
saying
no,
that
no.
we're gonna save that money back anyway, is what
Right, pay,
it's saying.
hire the guy,
Yeah.
Yep.
and you're overspending for a month. And in January and February, you get that money back because he's not making what Jimmy was making.
So over the next 6 months, that's,
You're too good, Fred.
So Jimmy's gonna leave in November,
yeah.
and there's
No.
not gonna be anybody, he's gonna leave in November,
No, that's fine. He's gonna leave in
and
November,
we're gonna pay him through December,
right?
okay?
So you're gonna pay
This guy for 6 weeks, whoever you bring on.
Sammy Snowplower for November and December,
2 months.
for 2 months. And this character makes something,
Jimmy leaves.
and Jimmy leaves, and you don't pay Jimmy anything for 6 months.
He's
And
gone.
Jimmy was making more than this guy. Does that make up the difference? Does that make up
Savings,
2 months' worth of this character?
The $8,000 over the next 6 months will probably,
Yeah, I would think it.
Well, let me also ask this, the 6 weeks that Jimmy has for vacation, all that, is that accrued someplace? Does that just come out of the budget, or
It's
is
out of
that?
the budget.
So
It comes
there's
out of the
nothing,
budget.
even though people can bank this up for lots of weeks like this, it's not.
You can only, yeah, you can accrue up to a year's worth of your vacation
Okay, all
time,
right.
so, and
Okay.
that's a budget.
Right.
Yeah, I follow what you're saying, Fred. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, if they come in, let's just say, use easy numbers, it's $100,000 salary for Jimmy, and you hire the new person at, say, 60,000, right? So it's a
Or
40%, or even 80. It's a 20% salary savings for 6 months. Does that offset the 2 months that they come on?
Right, that's all, you gotta do the math to see if it works, but it may
Works,
be
but
that the money's
it may
already in
be
there.
a wash.
And if you need it at the end of the year, come see us. Right? I'm not saying don't hire the guy.
I can't hire somebody if I don't have the funds appropriated.
Well, you do have the funds appropriated.
Okay, so here's Jimmy Clyde. Let me see if I can zoom in on this.
We're squabbling over $8,000. I get it, but I think, I see what you're saying. You need the money,
I gotta have,
it has to be appropriate. We
It has
just
to be.
can't say, well,
it can be turned back.
Jimmy's budgeted all the way to June anyway, because we didn't know he was gonna retire. So it's in the budget, is what you're saying.
It's there.
So there's a $20,000 savings there.
Okay, Jimmy Clyde's salary is appropriated for 102, okay? He goes out December 31st. He's gonna leave in November, but he's gonna be paid through December.
Yeah.
So he's paid 51,000.
Yeah.
If I bring a new person in at the end of October, so that they can work with Jimmy for a month,
Yeah.
and I'm paying them now from October
Yeah.
through the end of June,
Yeah.
at a lower rate, I need $60,000. I have 51,000 left from Jimmy's salary.
Okay, that's what he was asking. That's what Fred was asking.
And that's the answer.
So,
So, as I suspected, they already figured that out.
We almost had her, Fred.
I was like, oh, they're trying to like get me. I know my numbers. I had it all ready. I was like, wait a minute.
You had to think about it for a minute, though, didn't you?
So I was like, where's that thumb drive?
All right.
So, yeah,
Okay,
that's,
so
Well,
that's,
she was thinking about where she
that's
had the
the answer.
numbers.
Okay,
So the answer is?
8,000.
okay.
Yeah, so he is just looking for $8,000. You have not used any of your reserve fund transfer. Balance is $150,000. That was appropriated.
Oh, it's only September.
You didn't use any last year, really.
Well, but that doesn't roll over, so come on.
Sure.
That was good financial management last year.
Yeah.
We take it out of snow and ice.
We take everything out of snow and ice.
That and the overtime for the fire department or the police department.
All right.
Can always come out of overtime.
Okay. Well, any discussion, any more discussion on the 8,000?
I mean, it makes sense to do it, from my opinion, it's short money.
And there's really no other way to do
It
this,
gets-
is that right, Bonnie,
It
at
gets
this
some
point?
training in there, it gets some
Really
things
not. I
going.
mean,
He's
The only-
he's just
He's
a
not
phone
saying
call.
hired until October, and town meeting is,
Well, I mean, if the selectmen want this to happen,
but you gotta have it now so you can go out and hire somebody and
gotta
do
find
all
the
we
money
that.
to
gotta
do it.
advertise, we wanna get the ad out like tomorrow.
Makes sense. I mean, I,
And are we hiring somebody local? So they
We're
can.
hiring out, we're posting it, so anybody can go out.
oh, you mean promote from within?
Just local, so that when it snows, they can get to the snowplows.
he lives in Winchton.
If you hire somebody out in Timbuktu,
That's not
and
part of
they're
this
2
discussion.
hours
though.
away in a snowstorm,
Yeah, I
they
think the
might as
job
well stay
description
home because the
addresses
roads are plowed.
what the
That's up to
requirements
Chris
are.
to do.
Yeah, that's not.
Well, okay.
He wants to plan poorly for snowstorms and hire the guy from Winchendon if he wants to.
Well, what you do is you just don't go home.
Yeah, there you go.
That's what I did as DPW Commissioner Somerville. We had the forecast, it was gonna snow tonight, I didn't go home.
Yeah.
I just stayed till the snowstorm was over and we got it cleaned, so.
Okay.
I'm good on this.
Well, so, yeah, in effect.
But that
I
was
mean,
me.
This should play out the way you said anyway, because if it, at the end, well, no, you've already got it figured in, but if there were the extra money at the end of the year, it rolls back in anyway, so.
Yeah.
Moving right along.
All right.
So,
Any other
so do we have to
discussion?
vote on that, or was that just a?
You need to
discussion?
vote on it.
Okay.
We gotta vote.
I'll make a motion to approve, it's $8,000, right?
8,000 even.
Make a motion to approve $8,000 for this.
We have a motion to approve,
Second.
and a second. From Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous.
Great. Can you just sign, like, here, and then just...
Anything else, Bonnie?
That's all I have.
Just one other quick note. Any of you old timers that remember Tom O'Day passed away over the weekend?
Yeah, I saw that.
He's quite a character, and I miss him coming into his budget review. He always wore two guns, one on his ankle, and he would come in and he'd put his foot up, and he'd cross his legs with the pistol. Every budget review, he'd do that.
I remember Tom standing underneath the no smoking on school property
Smoking.
and smoking a cigarette. And the lady came out and said, "Chief, see that sign?" And he said, "Call a cop."
Yeah. He was a character.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah, I heard it was like complications
And
from surgery or something.
Chris apologized that he couldn't be here tonight. He has pneumonia. And I was like, please don't come.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't want him.
Okay, we have minutes that Tom Farrell sent around. If you looked at them, I fed back that it was Anita that was put on the board with you.
Yeah.
And that was the only other change I had. If anybody had any changes, omissions, additions,
No.
any discussion?
Except the spelling of my name is the only difference.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to spell it properly?
Yes, Allen.
Ian,
Thank you.
oh, that's the way it is.
That was your favorite thing, so I had to get it done right.
There you go, absolutely. All right, I'll entertain a motion to,
Motion to approve?
as written, and any second?
Seconded.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. All righty, just a quick member update, if anybody has anything, or just, Greg, nothing?
Nothing.
Gary, you?
How about the,
A town administrator.
Town
Search
administrator.
committee? Yeah.
what's going on there?
We met, and I'm, once again, the bridesmaid on that board as well, so.
Tim
The vice-
Goddard
the
ended up
vice
as being a
chair.
member of that, as opposed
Tim,
to?
yes, so Tim Goddard is now on the board.
Who's on that board?
It's Tim, Anita, from the personnel board, myself as your representative, Chase as the chair, and Mike Fontanella from the school committee.
Okay.
And we met, we got the board figured out. We talked, so we are going to go outside. We determined that as a board, fully announce it. I shouldn't say we're going to. And we are having a gentleman come in to discuss the assessment, if we want to do an assessment center or not. We were all interested to find out because it went so well with the police, but we couldn't quite understand why we would need an assessment center for a town administrator and what that entailed. So we're going to find out tomorrow night. We'll get kind of see if we think that it would be a benefit or something that we could do without, or if we can decide later on, things like that.
And are we staying with the job description as it's?
It is, the job
Printed, or
description,
I just don't know?
yep, the job description is fairly updated. So we're going to keep the job description. What we are tinkering with Ann is the announcement itself, making sure that we highlight, this wonderful town that you want to come work in. But a lot of that's already written, so we'll just kind of adjust that language to draw the right people in. And then it's just basic conversations about, do we want to put the salary range on there? Do we want to confuse people on, that it's negotiable, that the selectmen determine and all that, but, so.
What's the time frame expected?
It's pretty aggressive. We want to announce by the 1st of October, so we're meeting every week to get the announcement out. And then in November, we're, resume going and then setting up interviews so we can get some, even though Keith, you know, is retiring in November 2nd is his last day, he's on the books till end of January, I think.
January 21st, I think.
So there's your timeline. We'd like to have somebody in somewhere in there.
So he's really not part of the process then?
He was in, we picked his brain
Okay, good.
last meeting.
Good.
He was our first individual we wanted in there.
He
and
knows a lot of
I took
people,
pages
too,
of
man.
notes. You know, I learned a lot about him, but also about, you know, we asked some tough questions, you know, his weaknesses and what he thinks the new person should bring. So a lot of ideas, you know, to help us develop our questions for the interview. And we're also in the search to have, we're gonna have another probably town administrator and assist come in from another successful community. So we're gonna have another, you know, pick their brain as well, you know, or another town that recently went through this process to find out how things went, so. But yeah, it's aggressive schedule, hopefully. We think that there's gonna be a good pool, you know, I have to assume. And like, you know, Tim Goddard said, it's, people wanna work here, so I think we'll see some
Good candidates.
good candidates come through.
How's the, are there any concern about like salary differences from a financial perspective, like what Keith makes today versus
Yeah.
a new hire? Are we gonna have to, if we go to market, are we gonna have, is Keith above market rate, is he below market rate, or is he?
Well, I think Littleton as a whole is pretty conservative on town administrator. I mean, our scale, I mean, if you look at some of the surrounding communities, they're pretty high. But yeah, so Keith would be considered pretty much on the higher end of our scale. But he's not capped out by any means, but he's on the higher end, so just depending on that individual that we got in and what they could negotiate with the selectmen. It's just a matter of them understanding that this is
That's the range.
the range, you know, we can't
Yep.
really bust out of that. I guess theoretically you could, but we are bound by, you know, that, so. And we did lose, I remember on the police committee, we did lose a few people that we wanted to interview. That's when we didn't post a job, the salary range, but when we found out who we wanted to interview, we called them and said, this is the salary range, are you still interested, we'd like to interview. I think we lost one or two that said, no, you please withdraw my name for consideration, so that might happen. But I think we're actually gonna post the salary range on this one, so that'll,
I think it's a good
That's
idea.
a good idea too,
Eliminate.
to save
Yeah,
people time
right,
if they're not
exactly.
interested.
so yeah, so there you go. So we'll get this, and we're not restricted as much as we were with the police chief selection. If we have 3 really qualified candidates, the selectmen are gonna get them.
Right,
You know,
absolutely.
if there's 4, we don't wanna get too many, but I
Right,
mean,
right.
we would like to have them have a good selection of a variety of candidates, so.
One thing that I really believe that Keith brought to the town was the link to Boston.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And the
Yeah.
politics. And I think that's a huge set of shoes to fill.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's
Might be
high
unfillable.
on the list of wants or needs for this individual, because the number of grants and.
Yeah, we talked to him about that.
activities
and
and
He
all
said
that.
there are towns, you would be surprised, where the town administrator sits in their building and doesn't go to all these events and gets first ear on these grants and these,
No,
thing, so
you know,
it's-
of all the things he's done, that, to me, that has really benefited
Yeah.
the town in many, many ways. And I'd really hope that we would look for somebody that, if they don't have those contacts,
Yeah, no,
that they
it's-
have a bent to go
Yeah.
find them out.
Right.
You know, or if we can buy Keith's seersucker suit and
I
bow
know.
tie, they'll think it's Keith.
he did think that the community needed someone maybe perhaps with a construction background or something where that side of things, where this town is really getting into the sewer and the revitalization of the common and all these things, maybe that type of background
Space needs.
might help a
Gary,
little bit.
they're also looking for a facilities
Yeah.
director who also has these, because
Yeah.
yes, I take the minutes for PNBC,
Yeah.
and they're talking about it as
Wonder where I
well,
heard
so-
that.
So it's gonna be,
Okay.
no, it's a great,
Okay.
I think the board, the board is,
Great.
we wish it was 7, but the bylaw says 5, so I think 5, we can manage. It's just tougher to make sure every week we can be there because it's
there and
aggressive,
have
that's
that,
all.
yeah.
So puts a little bit more stress on us that way, but
Okay,
we're gonna do it, we're gonna get
great.
the best qualified candidates in front of the selectmen, so.
And we sent 3 to the board when Keith was hired, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So we-
Alan, do you have anything?
No, I'm good.
Betsy?
I went to my first CPC meeting,
Okay.
so a couple people asked questions. That sounds like what Fred would ask. Fred would ask that question, so just so you know, you're not forgotten. The tough questions, oh, that sounds like a Fred question. They were just getting started for the year too, but I mean, the things that they're talking about, and nothing big, major right there, or specific. The items that came up were the bathhouse for Park and Rec, and the whole thing with the 2 tiers and whether the tech school can help with that, and the perk tests and all those things. Housing was there, the Baker House, again, nobody's, what's the status of that? There was a lot of discussion around that. And apparently there's a CP coalition that we haven't paid dues for a few years, a state thing. So the discussion is, do we put the money in for that and help with basically the lobbying efforts or not? So those are the kind of discussions, just getting started, so.
So are there already requests for the Baker
No,
House?
no.
Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
Sounds like it. Just a brief update on the sewers. At this point, the capital cost is in the $27 million range. The Weston Sampson is banking on $6.7 million in grants. About $3 million of that they're hoping to get out of the earmark, the $6 million earmark that Jamie Eldridge put in the budget. Keith is stepping right up on this one. He set up a meeting in Boston with the Economic Development Group and the DOE, and trying to figure out where the money is and how much, if any, either of those departments are interested in releasing. As with, as you well know, with an earmark, it's not worth the powder to blow it to hell if the department head doesn't want
Yeah,
to
do we actually get it?
spend the money, right?
So where's the rest of the money gonna come from?
And the other, Mass, see, if you can read it, you can,
Oh, no, I need to.
Are they more likely to give us money if they think we're gonna build housing in the common?
well. No,
Is that connected at all?
Well, one of them, it's,
Already got our
economic
housing.
development is about jobs.
I know, but the
And-
state's about housing, so.
Well, we've already hit our housing numbers.
No,
right
I
out the
know, but they
gate.
want more, I know,
I
so I just,
No, but that's part of the pitch.
City living.
Keith is gonna try to make
okay.
on the 4th, to try to take the temperature. If they say, well, two things. One is, how much do you think you might be willing to release? And 2 is, over what period of time?
Yeah.
So is it, oh, yeah, here, $6 million, and he comes back with a check? Or, no, I'm only gonna give you $2 million, but it's gonna be over 3 years. We can put that into the model. But if you added up all of the grants that we possibly could get, it's in the $9 to $10 million range.
It's about half.
So, well, it's
No, not even,
70%, that's 6.7 million is what's in here. And,
6.7.
So you're at 20 million still. I mean, you're
We still need another,
20
yeah,
20
20.
million,
yeah.
which is hookup.
Yeah, it's $20 million, and they want to go for this Quirk, which is basically a manufacturing plant.
Yep.
And we'll literally need to truck in about 70 tons of food waste a week to feed the digester, because we don't have enough
Here.
sewage coming in. So it's a business that we're gonna have to run and figure out how to be in that business to be effective at it, so. It's not a slam dunk at this point, but,
Is there proponents or opponents coming to the meetings and showing up, or is it just nobody shows up?
So, you know, I don't, I don't know specifically what presentation they'll make at town meeting, but I know they're trying to send out flyers, the business community. Apparently, I went to the Light and Water Commissioners meeting a week ago, and I have a big ASICs on the Economic Development Committee. And the Littleton Business Group,
Association.
I don't know what the name of it is, but the Littleton Business Group went to them and asked them if they would be willing to went to the Light and Water Commissioners, asked them if they would be willing to put what sounded like a questionnaire into the light bills. I thought they were asking if they could put the trifold folder that the sewer group is putting together in the light bills. So there was some confusion over which it was. But the business group and the economic development group are at least in contact. And Ivan is obviously a Light and Water Commissioner, so he's bringing that back to Light Department, asking if they will put a stuffer in the mail. And they were still chatting about it when I left, so I'm not sure where that really ended up. But so that's all I have. As more things come out, I'll send them out to you, so you're at least aware. But at this point, it's a $27 million bill.
That's a $2.2 million bill right there.
Well, right up front, yeah, absolutely, and that's on top of the, I don't know, was it 480,000 we've already put into it. So it's beginning to become real money.
Yeah, real money with
Well,
the,
I think
The
we've
3
got a better
million
idea
mark.
of the numbers too, which helps. It helps us make decisions.
Right, and, now there are rumors that Sam Park might be interested in coming back in. Apparently, wants to do more on his site and his,
The Hilton Garden.
I don't know what he's doing up there. It's another, I don't know, but he wants to do more expansion.
Yeah, there's room.
And
He's
he's
Great.
gonna have to put more money into his
Yeah.
system, so he's wondering if the town's interested in doing something, and I don't know what that is. So, a whole lot of moving parts still, so.
Awesome.
Okay, on that happy note, I'll entertain a motion.
I already entertained it.
If you entertain it, I'll second it then.
Okay, we have an entertainer and a seconder. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.